In hindsight, going to the DMV the week that I was preparing a sermon on patience was probably not my best idea. But Friday afternoon, that's where I found myself, and I went in ready for the joy that experience usually is, and I took my number, D04, and I sat down, and D05 came in and sat down next to me, and we began to commiserate with one another as sufferers do sometimes, and we had some good conversation. I told him about how I never managed to have just one trip to the DMV. There's always some document that I was supposed to bring that I don't have, and it always, it's kind of like going to the hardware store. It takes at least one more trip than I think it's going to take. We're laughing about the experience. D06 comes in and sits next to him, and just to mess with her, he tells her that he's been there since 8:30 in the morning waiting, and she says some very unpastoral words, and we're watching the little number change about once every 15 minutes up on the screen and waiting for our turn. At one point, I decide I've got to go to the restroom, and so I hand D04 to D05 and tell him if they call the number while I'm gone, you just go ahead. I'll make that sacrifice. I went 2 doors down the street to a restaurant and came back, and they still hadn't called my number. They finally called my number, and I go up, and I'm dealing with my business, and the thing that I have requires 2 different documents. And to tell this story, I have to admit something to you that's been a source of pain for much of my life. My first name is actually not Blake. My first name is actually James. That caused embarrassment every year at school, the first day of school, when the teacher would call roll and say James, and the kids would all giggle. But it got even worse because Blake is not even actually my full middle name. My middle name is Blakely. I don't know why my parents did that to me. I've never quite forgiven them for that. So after the snickering over James, the teacher would say, "Oh, is it Blakely?" And then they would really laugh. Anyway, that's been a challenge. But that also creates challenges for things like going to the DMV, because I had 2 documents that I had to present to them to get them to do the thing they needed to do. One of them said James, the other said Blake. The person behind the counter was mystified by this and did not understand why this could be. And I showed her my driver's license, which says James Blakely McKinney, and said, "I think you can see these are actually the same person. Not only does it have the same VIN number for the same vehicle on both documents, but here's my driver's license." She said, "I think I'm going to have to talk to a supervisor about this." So I'm standing at the counter waiting. She goes back, talks to the supervisor, comes back, and she finally says, "I think we found a way to solve this unsolvable problem and take care of things." So she starts doing the work, and then she looks at my driver's license and realizes that it says James Blakely. So now we have 3 names in the picture. There's James, there's Blake, and there's Blakely, and this just apparently broke the entire system. And so I wound up spending a couple hours at the DMV for absolutely no purpose whatsoever, and they told me I was going to have to get another copy of one of those forms in a different name so that they could do what they needed to do. And I'm walking out, and I'm frustrated about how I've wasted this time. This is time that I could have been spending working on my sermon on patience. How about that? That's funny, God. Good job. Thank you. Well, if you had known that we were going to be talking about patience today, you might have stayed at home. I almost stayed home because of this topic. It is a challenge for many of us, but it is a huge, important part of the renovation that God is doing in our lives. And we've been exploring that renovation on Sunday mornings. It's way more important than changing a physical building. He is changing our hearts. He is changing us from the inside out so that our character becomes more and more like the character of Jesus himself. Another way to say that is that he is working to grow the fruit of the Spirit in us. That list that we've seen in Galatians chapter 5 that says the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. He is producing that fruit in us. He is remodeling us, renovating us so that those character traits mark us more and more. Now, I'm not sure, but I bet if we were to go to if we were to take a survey of all the people and ask what character trait of those 9 is the biggest struggle for you, which one is the hardest for you to see in your life, I suspect that patience would probably be the one that would come to the top of the list. I know I've struggled with patience. Let's do a little self-assessment to see if maybe patience is a struggle for you. You might have a patience problem if, when you go to the grocery store and you're ready to check out, you carefully study all of the lines, you notice how many people are in each line, you do a mental calculation of the number of items in each cart that you can see, you're evaluating how quick the different people working at the different registers appear to be, and then you make your decision to decide which line to get in. And then you currently watch the other lines of where you would have been if you had gotten in that line to see if they beat you, and then you feel like a complete failure and like you've chosen poorly. If that's you, then maybe you have a problem with patience. If when you watch television that it never stays on the same channel for more than 47 seconds, you might have a problem with patience. If when you go on a trip, you ask the question, how long until we get there, more than twice, you might have a problem with patience. If you've ever banged on the bathroom door and told your sister to hurry up, you might have a problem with patience. If you have bite marks on your fingernails or what's left of your fingernails, you might have a problem with patience. If you've ever started a diet at lunchtime and stepped on the scales at 2 p.m. to see how your progress is going, you might have a problem with patience. If you've ever had a sibling or a parent or a child or a spouse do something just kind of mildly irritating, but then you just went supernova because of it, you might have a problem with patience. If your blood pressure shoots through the roof when you hear these words, all representatives are currently busy assisting other callers. Please hold and your call will be answered in the order in which it was received. I think maybe we might have a bit of a patience problem. Well, we might not enjoy this morning's scripture, but we need to hear it. Listen especially to the first two words and then listen to all of the rest of it. James 5, verses 7 through 11. Be patient, then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you too will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You've heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. We have before us this morning an unpleasant command to be patient. This is not something we want to hear. And on top of that, it says don't grumble. Like, it's not bad enough that God tells us to wait. He tells us to wait without griping. Wow, like even if I'm driving to work and there's bad traffic and I'm just stuck, I'm supposed to be patient and not complain. Even if I'm eating out and my drink cup is very obviously empty and has been for a long time and the server's walked by 4 times and not done anything about it, I'm still supposed to be patient without grumbling. Even if I'm sick and I don't feel well and I think the world owes me that I should feel better than I do, I'm supposed to be patient without grumbling. James is not speaking our language. He says, be patient. And we say, hurry up. He says, wait. And we say, now. He says, persevere. And we say, get it over with. We are not a very patient species. We're not born with patience. If you've ever seen a newborn who's hungry, just try telling that newborn, just wait patiently for a few minutes. It's not going to go very well. We have instant communication at our disposal. We are always moving quickly. Our food that we eat is typically fast food. We order things. This phone I had to order a new case for. I ordered it at 7 p.m. Friday night, and at 7 a.m. Saturday morning, it was on my porch. If I'd wanted, I could have tracked it impatiently, 10 houses away, 9 houses away, 8 houses away. We are a society that is built around impatience. We're built around speed. We're built around comfort. A little while ago, our garbage disposal went out in our sink in the kitchen, and it was the most unbearable, just horrible inconvenience of my life. I had to actually scrape the food off into the trash can. Who can imagine something like that? Just think about if the dishwasher had gone out. We are just always about our convenience, our speed, our comfort. We're not very patient. And to this impatient world, the scripture gives a very countercultural command to be patient. Now, to make sure we understand what this command is asking of us, let's make sure we know what patience even is. It's the Greek word that's translated patience here in James 5 is the same one translated patience in Galatians 5 in the list of the fruit of the Spirit. And here's a definition I would offer of that word. To be patient is to be at ease when you're not in control of events, timing, and people. To be at ease when you're not in control of events, timing, and people. Some of you might need to circle the not in control part of that definition because that's what makes it so hard to be patient. Things don't go the way you want them to go. They don't go as quickly as you want them to go. People don't do what you want them to do. Patience also is connected to the description of love that we see in 1 Corinthians 13 that says love is slow to anger. When we are patient with people, we don't just blow our top at them for the smallest thing. We're slow to anger. In fact, one definition that someone has given of patience, it is enduring ill treatment without plans for revenge. We're patient when we don't plan to get revenge on the person who is making things unpleasant for us. The King James Version translates the word long-suffering. I can't think of a less pleasant word than long-suffering. That does not sound like a lot of fun. It's related to perseverance, which is another word that James uses in verse 11, which is when we keep going when it's hard. Patience is the opposite of having a short fuse. It's the opposite of being in a hurry. It's the opposite of irritability. Being at ease when we're not in control of events, timing, and people. And it's a trait that we see on display in Jesus. As with all of the fruit of the Spirit, he is the one who shows us what it looks like when this character trait is in us. He is so patient with his disciples when they are being the disciples and they just don't get it, and he has to explain it again and again and again. He shows us what patience looks like. When he's interrupted, he's in the middle of teaching an important message, and the roof starts to make noise, and ceiling tiles start falling down, and someone is lowered down on a mat, a paralyzed man, interrupting his very important words. And instead of lecturing them about how rude they've been and how they've interrupted him, he heals the man and uses it as a wonderful teaching opportunity. He handles interruptions with patience. There's times when his disciples and his friends are just begging him, come on, Jesus, flex your powerful, miraculous muscles, show the world who you are. And he tells them, my time has not yet come. Be patient. Trust God's timing. On the cross, when he's suffering tremendous agony, and they're literally daring him to come down off the cross and prove that he's the Messiah. Instead, he waits and he patiently endures the agony. And then after the resurrection in Acts 1, his disciples come to him and say, is it time now? Are you going to restore the kingdom? Is this when everything gets all better? And he has to tell them, settle down, trust God's timing. Jesus is constantly patient. Patience is a trait that we often admire in other people without really expecting it of ourselves because it seems like too much trouble. It's an unpleasant command. But patience is also a pressing need. Not only is it something that Jesus says we should have, it is something the world basically requires of us. I want you to think about it. If God says that the fruit of patience is something we're going to need, what does that tell you about what we should expect from life? We would like to have a life that doesn't require patience. We would like for things to always go well and always go when we want them to go. But the very fact that God says patience is going to be required, that he wants you to have the fruit of patience, is an indicator that life is going to have times that do not go our way, times that aren't easy, times when circumstances are beyond our control. And this is actually a recurring idea with the fruit of the Spirit. All of these character traits are things that we live in spite of our circumstances. They are things that are required and called out of us when circumstances are not good. We need the fruit of love when people are hateful and ugly to us. We need the fruit of joy when life tries to make us bitter and negative. We need the fruit of peace when we're surrounded by chaos and conflict. We need the fruit of patience when things are not going our way at all. So the very existence of the fruit of patience implies that we are going to have a life that's a handful. It's going to be full of DMVs and broken garbage disposals and waiting rooms and traffic jams and dreams that get delayed and hopes that get dashed. We're going to have struggles in this life. Patience is necessary because life tries our patience. Life requires our patience. Not only does God demand it, but life requires it. James also makes it clear that patience is a live possibility. I love the fact that he doesn't just give us this challenge, this command, but he gives us examples to show us that it can be done. He points to farmers, first of all. I remember when Caleb, our son, was little, one time we had carved a pumpkin for Halloween and he decided to plant some of the seeds. So he spent a lot of time patiently putting the seeds in the ground. He went inside and watched TV for 5 minutes and then he headed back for the door. And I said, "Where are you going, buddy?" He said, "I want to check and see if my pumpkins are ready yet." Most farmers are a little more patient than that. And James refers specifically to the ancient Near Eastern farmer who lives in a place where rain is seasonal. It only comes a couple of times a year. And in between, all you can do if you're a farmer is wait. You cannot control it. Farmers have to be patient. The prophets were patient, is the second example that he gives. And you could pick your biblical prophet and find examples of that. Jeremiah comes to my mind. He's a guy who preached a message that was not popular with the people to whom he was speaking, and there were times that he was put in prison, times he was beaten, times he was locked in the stocks, times he was thrown into a cistern, and yet he continues, he perseveres, he is patient through it all, and he doesn't go get a job as a vacuum cleaner salesman or something and just give up on the whole enterprise. He is patient. And then Job is the third example that James gives us. You've got the farmer, you've got the prophets, you've got Job. And Job suffered more than we can imagine. Unimaginable anguish. He lost everything and still he kept going. Still he held on to God. All of these people are living proof that we can endure life's hurts and stand firm, that patience is possible. But how? What's the path toward patience? We want to do more than just say, hey, you ought to be patient, and hey, look, these people were patient, why don't you do it? What are some specific things we can do? Well, it's the fruit of the Spirit is patience. So we cannot achieve it just by our effort alone. It is something that God grows in us, but we can cooperate with Him in what He's trying to grow in us. We can cooperate with Him in His efforts to renovate us. And there are two specific things, two crucial steps I want to point you to toward growing patience. If we can do these two things, it really will make a difference. The first is to change the way you look at the inconveniences of life. Kimberly mentioned this in her children's message a moment ago. But when you get stuck in traffic, or when you have an item that you really wanted and you order it and it's on back order, or when you have a coworker who gossips about you for the 14th time and it really gets on your nerves, when your normal response to those inconveniences would be anger, would be demanding that the universe owes you better than that, what if we choose to see those inconveniences another way? What if we view them as opportunities to learn and practice? What if we intentionally train ourselves so that when we feel our shoulders starting to get tense, our blood pressure starting to go up, our anxiety starting to spike because we are not in control of people and circumstances and timing, then what if we see that as an opportunity to learn? God, this person's running late for an appointment with me. This is going to mess up my schedule for this day. But instead of just getting mad about it, let me ask you to show me something about myself, about you, about the world through this. Remember that the universe doesn't revolve around me, and I can be at peace no matter the circumstances. And this little opportunity, when things don't go your way, when you experience that inconvenience, is a chance to grow your spiritual muscles for times that are probably coming later that are more than just an inconvenience, that are more than just having your garbage disposal go out or having to wait at the DMV, things that are much more serious. It can be training for those times. And we can even choose to put ourselves in positions of waiting and inconvenience so that we can practice patience. I've suggested this spiritual discipline to you before, and not many of you have taken me up on it. But you could choose when you're driving your car and you're approaching a stoplight, instead of counting the number of cars in each lane and looking at the make and model and the age of the driver in each of the car and then shifting into the one you think is going to pull out the fastest, you can just stay in the lane that you're in. and just use it as an opportunity to practice patience. You can intentionally choose the longest line at the grocery store and leave your phone in your pocket or your purse. Don't pull it out. Just wait. Just as training for times that are probably going to come when things much harder than waiting for a car to pull out or waiting for the chance to check out at the store is going to happen. You can choose to chew your food when you eat, to take your time with each bite instead of just inhaling it and making it go as quickly as you can go. There are steps you can take to intentionally slow down and intentionally experience kind of a controlled inconvenience, if you will, to build your spiritual muscles, to help you learn and practice and train for those harder things in life. So one way that you can cooperate with God in growing the fruit of patience in you is by changing the way you look at the inconveniences of life. The second way that you can grow to cooperate with God is to change the way you look at Jesus. And this is what James really focuses on here in this passage. This is the practical application that I think we see, and this is the how to follow the command to be patient. Because notice what he says in verse 8. He says, "You too be patient and stand firm because," why? "Because the Lord's coming is near." We can be patient when we realize that Jesus' coming is near. The word that's translated coming in verse 7 and verse 8, here you can pretend you went to seminary and quote this word and impress people. It's parousia, it's the Greek word. And it's a word that was used in secular Greek to talk about when the king would come for an official visit to a place, or some dignitary would show up. It was their parousia, it was their coming, their arrival. It was like the red carpet. It was like Taylor Swift coming to Arrowhead last week. That's kind of what it was. But early Christians, I thought that would get way more chuckles than that, I'm sorry. When early Christians took that word parousia and basically turned it into a technical term to describe the expectation that we have that Jesus is coming back at the end of history. That his first coming to this planet is not the last time we're going to see him, that he is going to return. And when he does, he's going to make everything right. He's going to come back as the judge and as the deliverer, and when he does, everything that is upside down and wrong and messed up in this world is going to get turned right side up. And the people who belong to him are going to be brought with him to the most unimaginable and amazing future. And if we know that he's coming, if we know that, yes, this current chapter I'm in right now is not going the way that I want it to go, but wow, I already know the ending and it's going to be amazing beyond belief. If we know that, then that changes the way we handle the hard things we face right now. It helps us to be patient with the pain that we experience in the here and now when we know that the future is unimaginably amazing. Not only is his coming near, but look at the last thing that James says about him in the passage we read at the end of verse 11, where it says, "The Lord is full of compassion and mercy." The other thing that we need to change about the way we look at Jesus is to realize not only is he coming, not only is his coming near, not only is he the king and the reigning ruler of the universe who's coming back to make things right, but he is full of compassion and mercy. The one who is in charge loves you more than you can fathom. The most important being in the entire universe treasures you, and he loves you in spite of your sin. His mercy is more, as we heard the choir sing earlier today. You are loved more than you can imagine, and knowing that reality changes your perspective on the things that make you impatient here and now. So if we see Jesus as he is, then we will see our circumstances differently in light of him, and we'll be able to have patience when things are hard. And so the door to patience is trust. And I realize this sounds like a total preacher thing to say, a total Sunday school answer, but the key to being patient is to trust Jesus. But it really is, to have confidence in his character, to trust that he really will return, that he really is in command of history, and that in the big scheme of things, the light and momentary troubles that we face, to use the biblical phrase to describe them, are nothing compared to the glory that will be revealed. We can trust that he really is full of compassion and mercy. The one who is running the show is crazy about me, and that changes the way I look at things. I don't deserve it at all, but that's the way he loves me. And if we don't trust Jesus, if we're not confident in his competence, if we don't really believe that he knows what he's doing and that he's got things handled, if we think that the future is uncertain, it's up for grabs, it's up in the air, and if we think it's up to us to determine how things are going to turn out in our world and in our future, then we're going to be impatient all the time. But if we trust that Christ really is full of compassion and mercy and really is coming soon, that changes things. So when you feel yourself getting impatient, that's an indicator that your trust level is getting low. If you trust him, you'll be able to be patient. Trust leads to patience. Patience, another way to say that, patience is a byproduct of trusting Jesus. You cannot will yourself to be patient. You cannot just try really hard to be patient. But if you look at your circumstances differently, and if you look at Jesus differently and trust him, then patience will come. The last word for this morning is that patience comes from letting God be God. Patience happens when we say, things are not going my way. This is not the way I envisioned this day going. Not everything is happening how I wanted, when I wanted. People around me aren't doing what I wish they would do. But that's okay. Because even though I'm not in control of things, God, I know that you are, and it's better that way than for me to be in control of things. I trust you. I can wait patiently because the universe is in your hands, and I am in your hands, and that's a great place to be. God's got a big renovation project going on in your life. And he is building in you the characteristic of patience. Will you cooperate with the work that he's doing? I want to ask you to bow with me for just a moment. And let's have a little just you and God kind of conversation here about this. Would you, first of all, tell God thank you for his great patience with you? You are still a work in progress, and he hasn't given up on you, and he hasn't turned away from you, and he's given you chance after chance after chance in his great patience. And will you confess your impatience to him? Maybe think of a specific time that you've lost your patience in recent days. Maybe just the general tendency that you know kind of marks you. And will you admit to him that impatience is really a symptom of failing to trust him? Failure to realize that he's the king who's coming back to make things right. Failure to realize that he is full of compassion and mercy. Ask him to help you see him clearly so that you'll be able to be patient when circumstances aren't what you want them to be. Jesus, you really can change us. You all have already changed history, and you've already made the plan for the future. Let that knowledge settle in on us in the here and now so that we can live in light of it and live with patience. And now, Lord, help us to be ready to respond to you, to the good news of who you are and what you've done and what you're going to do. Help us to hold nothing back as we respond to you. In your name we pray. Amen.